I'm ready for the educational challenge.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Cameron Muhammad from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Welcome to the third day of the first new National Educational Paradigm Online Conference. Today we have another full day of presenters. Coming up, today we have Dr. Wesley Muhammad speaking on An Education for the Gods, the history of Asian educational systems, and the Supreme Wisdom lessons. Brother Abdul Wahid Muhammad and Brother Rashid Al Muhammad will give a presentation on the formation of a new government of peace, the 9 systems of the body. And Sister Tracy C. Muhammad will close out our presentation with a talk entitled Let the Revolution Begin, a cultural center and library parody of the world. Closing out the day, Brother Troy 5X and Sister Deborah Al Muhammad will announce the launch of the I Accept the Educational Challenge 21-day campaign and organizing the Ministry of Education Phase 2, identifying our human resources, planning the development for a Ministry of Education Human Resource Department. The preceding presenters have accepted the educational challenge. How about you? Will you accept the challenge?
In the name of Allah, who came in the person of Master Farrakhan Muhammad, to whom our holy praises are forever due, I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and I bear witness that the most honorable Elijah Muhammad is his living and exalted Christ, and I further bear witness that the honorable Brother Minister Louis Farrakhan is their divine reminder, the apostle of God in our midst. In their name, I greet you, family. Assalamu alaikum. I am honored to be invited to participate in this educational conference. I would like to thank Sister Deborah, Sister Dr. Ava, and all of the Ministry of Education. To say a conference such as this is vitally important is to grossly understate the truth of the matter. So I'm honored and humbled to have been included among those considered to make an offering in regards to carving out, helping to construct a new educational paradigm, which is the mandate. And by new educational paradigm, there's a sense in which we are really talking about a return of the old educational paradigm. And that is what I have been tasked, if you will, to discuss that old educational paradigm. The subject I was given is a wonderful subject. An education for the gods, the history of ancient educational systems and the supreme wisdom lessons. Well, that's it right there. An education for the gods. It is probably in the domain of education that most clearly distinguishes this world from the previous world, the world of the white man from the world of the original man, or said better, the world of Satan from the world of God, Allah himself. The differences in the way education is done distinguishes this world from the world of the original black man all over the planet Earth prior to the rise of the white man into hegemony or rulership. While the white man seems to understand the point, after all, education, the term, implies a drawing out. which is precisely the point as the original man, i.e. God, understood and did education. But while the process of drawing out is at the etymological root of Western education, that's not the practice of Western education. The practice of Western education is a putting in, a depositing in students as if empty vessels, depositing that which will make them useful, make them fit into the existing paradigm, and make them useful as tools to the existing paradigm. That's contrary to the purpose of education. That's contrary to the way education was done in the ancient world. The point of education is not to deposit in, but to extract out of. The Honorable Brother Minister Farrakhan used the most perfect analogy. He has given us to see that every human being is a seed. And every seed has one of two fates. Either that seed will find its way in the right environment with access to the requisite amount of light that will allow it to germinate, allow what God has deposited in it to bust out and be free, freedom, justice, and equality, and grow into what it was created to be. Those are the fortunate seeds. Those are the seeds that, again, find themselves in the right environment, an environment conducive to growth and self-expression. Because it's an environment that is accessible to light, which is the germinating principle. Light germinates all seeds. The unfortunate seeds, the other half of the seed population, are those that find themselves as food for others. Those are the human beings who never develop our potential, who never find ourselves in the right environment, bathing in the requisite amount of light, truth, that will self-activate us, will bust our true selves out of the seed shell, if you will. And those of us who are those unfortunate seeds, the best we are able to accomplish in life is to be an undeveloped or underdeveloped tool for somebody else, for something else. Western education does not facilitate self-realization. Western education does not facilitate a seed bursting in self-expression or self-articulation, because Western education is the wrong environment. It's an environment of antagonism to the very light necessary for self-expression, self-articulation. That light is God himself. And in Western education, God is exiled. In the original man's education, God is the whole point. That is to say, the whole point of ancient education is God. The difference between ancient education and Western education is highlighted not just in the fact that in Western education, God is exiled, Whereas in ancient education of the original black man and woman, God is the point. But in Western education, there's a separation of church and state. So if you want knowledge of God, you go to religion. But religion in the West only gives enough information about God to make us appropriate worshipers of God. But education of the original black man and woman in the ancient world, the point of that education was not to worship God, but to be God. The entire educational system of the ancient world in ancient Africa, Kemet, ancient Mesopotamia, Sumer, ancient India, ancient Israel, the classroom was always in a sacred precinct, the temple, because the center of the education was God Himself. But the point of that education was not to acquaint us with God the other, that we may serve Him properly. The point of the ancient educational system was to instruct man and woman in the sacred science of the black God. The sacred science of the black God. Sacred science, an empirical methodology, whereby one not only encounters the sacred God, but achieves the sacred God. The French esotericist Eduardo Suarez, he quoted an ancient teacher, Hierophant, or a teacher of the ancient mysteries. He quoted this ancient teacher instructing his student in this way. The ancient teacher told his student that there are two keys to knowledge. You get these two, you have everything. The first is this: the without is like the within. The upper is like the lower. What this Hierophant was articulating as the first key to knowledge is what they call the law of correspondence, as above, so below. The big and the small are identical in nature, they differ in degree. The outside is only a recapitulation of the inside. The macrocosm is simply the microcosm writ large. Understanding the one helps us understand the other. That's key to knowledge, number one. He said the second key to all knowledge is men are mortal gods and gods are immortal men. Men are dead gods and gods are living men. It can be said otherwise as man is God asleep and God is man awake. Those who understand these two keys of knowledge, the teacher of the ancient educational system said, happiness is for him or her. So the ancient educational system, the ancient mysteries, if you will, they did not call themselves mysteries, but Western writers writing of them describe them as mysteries. The ancient educational system, the totality of the curriculum was based on those 2 points. The without is like the within, a law of correspondence, and that God is man awake. and man is God asleep. Or men are gods who have died, and gods are men who are alive. And in the ancient educational system, we didn't just learn that as a point of fact. We learned that as a process of awakening. And so it took 42 years to get your degree in the ancient world, because it took 42 years for a dead God to become a living man. Is it a coincidence that our Savior, Master Farrakhan Muhammad, studied 42 years? I don't think so. The educational system of the ancient world, it took 42 years. You studied 7 levels of learning, but it had 2 basic phases. A phase we can call demolition, and a phase which we can call construction. See, that first phase was a phase of demolition. We come to the proper educational paradigm messed up. So in order for a dead God to be converted to a living man, there's some demolition, some deconstruction that needs to take place. So the first years of that educational system was a year in which the student was humiliated, was brought all of his or her worst fears were fed and exposed to him or her. His ego was battered and bruised. See, all of that is necessary in the process of godhood. This is why we in the mosque, which is the repository, which is the sacred precincts of the old educational paradigm, which is the prototype for the new educational paradigm. When we come in the mosque, life is hard. There's demolition. Once we've entered the mosque, once we entered this life, we've entered phase 1, the demolition phase. So it is hard. Our egos will be bruised. All of our fears, emotions, and detestations will be thrown right in our face. Some of us in the mosque, like some of those who entered the mysteries thousands of years ago, we won't make it to phase 2, the phase of construction, because a process of demolition will demolish us. And that's okay, because while self-realization is free to all of us, Islam is freedom, justice, and equality. That still does not guarantee that some of the seeds will be food, while some of the seeds will take root. Everyone won't get through that first phase of demolition. Our egos will be too battered and bruised. We got to get out of here. Our tolerance for hardship and what we would consider abuse will be tested to the max, and most of us, or many of us, will turn and flee, just as the old students of the ancient educational paradigm. They entered the sacred classroom to be gods, but they did not. Those who did not get through phase one, the demolition phase, never achieved what's called the summum bonum. See, the highest degree in the Western world is the doctorate. The highest degree in God's world was the summum bonum, the greatest good. And that was when you realized yourself. That is when you have successfully accepted your own and have achieved being yourself. They are those who survived phase one, the demolition, and successfully matriculated through phase two, the construction. What is that construction? The Honorable Brother Minister Farrakhan has said that each human being has two worlds in him or her. One world revolves around our appetites. The other world revolves around an enlightened mind and spirit. The Honorable Brother Minister Farrakhan states that in every human being, those two worlds war with each other for supremacy. The point of education, the old paradigm, was to help man and woman subordinate our lower world of our appetite to our higher world of enlightened mind and spirit. That's the point of education. And successfully subordinating the lower world of our appetites to the higher world of an enlightened mind and spirit is to achieve summum bonum, is to achieve the greatest good of all, is to achieve self-articulation, self-realization. It is to accept our own and be ourself, the active verb, be ourself. It took 42 years in the ancient world, in the ancient educational system. Those systems, the white man shut down. Christians went throughout the world and closed the educational systems down. They burned the library. But the Quran says, and the Jews plan, and Allah plans, and Allah is the best of planners. When the white man went throughout the world shutting down these old paradigm educational systems, shut down the temples, which were the classrooms, burned and stole the sacred books that he got his hands on, but he only got his hand on one or two. Many of them were protected from the wiles of Satan. So education the education of the gods never ceased totally. It went underground, but it came above ground in 1931 in the United States of America. A master of the old paradigm, a master teacher because he was a master student for 42 years, traveled all over the earth studying. Some of those books that Satan hoped to destroy, Well, some of them his father was able to secure for him, and he studied. What I'm suggesting is that that master student who became the master teacher, Master Farad Muhammad, Allah in a person, to whom all holy praises are due. What he brought to the hills of North America was the essence of the educational system that transforms dead gods to living men. The supreme wisdom is not religious dogma. It's a verifiable body of knowledge. We come into this Islam to be students enrolled, and our first assignment is to learn about God. The educational paradigm that the master teacher brought was not restricted to the system of questions and answers that as students we were to study and memorize. But the educational paradigm that he brought consisted of the entirety of the life that he requires of us as it was elaborated for us by his master student, the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. The totality of this life of Islam that Master Farad Muhammad brought, the entirety of it, what we study, what we experience, the hardships, the humiliations, the pain, the anger, the abuse, all of it is the educational paradigm. None of it is expendable. None of it. If we were to successfully cut out of our experience in Islam, if we were to cut out the hardships, if we were to cut out the humiliations, if we were to cut out the disappointments, we are cutting out part of the heart that makes us God. It's to cut out the foundational part of that educational process, the demolition part. Without the necessary demolition, there can be no appropriate construction. So we come to this. Our egos are demolished. Our sense of self is demolished, but by which we mean the self that developed in the world of Satan. That absolutely must be demolished in order for us to grow into, in order for us to get our degree in the sacred science of the Black God, in order for us to get that degree that certifies that we have accepted our own and then being ourselves, son and bundle. What I'm suggesting is that supreme wisdom is the old paradigm in this new world, but perfected and streamlined, we can say. The old paradigm was sufficient for its time, but it wasn't sufficient to withstand Satan. What Master Farad Muhammad brought was the new paradigm, the perfected paradigm, that the beginnings of it certainly, that has the power not just to withstand the world of Satan, but to demolish the world of Satan. And so we are forever thankful to Allah for coming into person and for reacquainting us with the whole purpose of education. This Islam brings out of us way more than it puts in us. It brings out the worst in us by nature, every single one of us. And it brings out the best in us. That's what education should do. When circumstance, the hardship of this life, of this educational paradigm, brings out the worst in us, so we can see it, encounter it, and demolish it. Phase one. When it brings out the best in us, it grows it. And so we're thankful to Allah for coming and saying they are so happy. They, meaning the old teachers, I suspect. They are so happy that now we can teach that the black man is God. That's the educational paradigm. The education that takes niggas and makes us gods. May Allah bless all of the presenters. May Allah bless us with a mightily successful educational conference. And may Allah continue to bless all of the laborers in the Ministry of Education. Your work is of vital importance. Assalamu alaikum.
I accept the educational challenge.
In the name of Allah, the all-wise, true and living God, and we thank Him for coming to us in the person of Master Farad Muhammad and raising the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, the exalted Christ, the Messiah, and leaving in our midst our divine Holy Spirit, the Honorable Minister Farrakhan. We thank them both for blessing us to be here, to be a part of the first National New Educational Paradigm Online Conference 2016. We got an invitation to be here, and our subject will be a study of government in general. This information was come to us from a speech that Minister Farrakhan made in 2009 at the Day of Atonement in Memphis, Tennessee, when his subject was accepting our responsibility to build our community. This information stimulated us to go forward, and with the person I'm going to introduce you to, who is the co-author of the book, Your Brain and the Nine System, the Physioeconomics of God's Self. And this time, I want to introduce to you Brother Rashid L. Muhammad. Here he is.
I'd like to thank Abdul Wahid Muhammad for asking me to assist in this presentation, this online conference presentation. And my role today will basically be to present various slides that are based upon the words of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, that we can use the mechanics of the human body as a pattern to build our own communities. So at this time, I'm going to step aside. We'll ask you to follow the slides, take notes if you would like. And at the end, I will bring Brother Abdul Wahid Muhammad back on, and he will close out our particular presentation of this evening. Thank you. These words that I'm about to read were taken from the Holy Day of Atonement 2009, accepting responsibility to build our communities the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. And he said, and I quote, "After he created himself, then came our universe." So the pattern of the universe is after the pattern of himself. So if you want to study government, study how God made you. The solution is to model the government after the human body, created in God's image. If we study this magnificent body, we can relate all these 10 systems to 10 ministries with subgroups and task forces that will allow us the privilege of building our own communities. So the question is, what is a ministry? A ministry is a governmental organization headed by a minister that is usually meant to manage a specific sector of public administration. Ministries are usually an immediate subdivision of the cabinet, that is, an executive council, and subordinate to its chief executive, also called chief minister. This slide will show the mechanics of the ministry, of the spiritual department, and the brain. I'm only going to read number 3 on the next few slides to give a summary to show the relationship. The master gland of the brain contains the pattern for the ministry of the spiritual department. Both synthesize a number of things into a coherent whole. The Ministry of Science and Technology. How does that relate to the skeletal system? The skeletal system contains the pattern for the Ministry of Science and Technology. Both are mainframes that house and protect processing units or organs that enable us to conduct business. The Ministry of Defense. The muscular system is exhibited by the functionality and outgrowth of the Ministry of Defense. Both function to provide protection, vitality, and freedom of movement. The Ministry of Trade and Commerce. The human body produces 10 to 100 millimeters of currency or voltage. This exposes a pattern how and why government currency is to be circulated. The Ministry of Education. The Ministry of Education is patterned after the digestive system. Both process and break down what we consume to balance our emotional state, growth, development, and productivity. The Ministry of Justice. The Ministry of Justice is patterned after the immune system. One protects the entire body, while the other protects the social order to preserve the community body politic. The Ministry of Arts and Culture. The Ministry of Arts and Culture is patterned after the respiratory system. We breathe in fresh air and expel old air. Likewise, arts and cultural centers are places to exchange old ideas for fresh ideas. The Ministry of Information. The Ministry of Information is patterned after the reproductive system. Both store and organize volumes of information to deliver a product. In the case of a human being, that product would be a baby. That product is you and I. And I'll just read this briefly. The Ministry of Information is an organized system for the collection, organization, storage, and communication of information to deliver a product. IT libraries constantly update to deliver information. On the other hand, our reproductive system is a collection of DNA In both sperm and egg, DNA converge updated volumes of information, or I call superconsciousness, at high speeds to develop systems and networks of information that will deliver a human being. The Ministry of Health and Human Services. The Ministry of Health and Human Services is the outgrowth and functionality of the nervous system, both fused directly into the brain or the entire body politic to maintain stability. Ministry of Agriculture. The Ministry of Agriculture is patterned after the endocrine system. Both produce the substance to grow the means by which our body, community, and economy evolves. Now, what you saw was an overview of the 10 ministries. And what I'd like to do now, I want to go into a little more detail, because with this new educational paradigm that we're presenting today, we hope to attract black scholars and scientists, mechanical engineers, attorneys, biologists, and chemists, so that they can understand that we can extract from the divine creation of the human being, which is patterned after God's creation, we can extract policy and law to build a government based upon that pattern that God has left for us to not only study, but to implement into civilization, into our communities. Let me read the details, or some details, of how the Ministry of the Spiritual Department directly relates or is patterned after the pineal gland of the brain. The Ministry of the Spiritual Department affects our communities, institutions, subgroups, and task forces in 3 basic ways by facilitating the transference of information, that is, mentally, spiritually, and morally. The brain, as we know, is the central nervous system. The pineal gland sits in the center of the brain. The pineal gland secretes black melanin to influence body cells in 3 basic ways: by facilitating the transference of information to bring together, B, decompose, or C, rearrange. And basically, this is the work of any spiritual house, which should be the center of any civilization, where mentally, spiritually, and morally, the people are uplifted, the people are reformed, and the people conduct themselves in a higher manner, especially the manner in which we conduct ourselves today in the United States of America. The Ministry of Justice. Here again, I'm going to just give some minute details. The Ministry of Justice is a law enforcement agency jurisdiction. Law enforcement is a local structure to protect community body politics from persons of ill will and intentions. Our immune system is the body's defense structure against infections and outside germs that give negative feedback to the body politic. Generally, the immune system understands how to deal with germs. The Ministry of Trade and Commerce. It entails a financial system for the distribution of resources and currency throughout the entire community. In a healthy economy, currency is circulated several times before leaving. Any other way means decay and death. Our circulatory system distributes blood, oxygen, currency, and nutrients throughout the entire body to stimulate all its organs. Any other way means death and decay. And when you look at that circulation system of the human being, veins represent your roadways, your transportation system, where our goods and services are carried to and fro, here and there. If you look at the bottom where it says gangrene, any doctor knows whenever blood is cut off from circulating in various parts of the body, death sets in. And this is the problem that we have today in our community. Is we call them ghettos, but death has set in because there's no currency circulating. So the agenda of this educational conference is to put together a curriculum whereby our people can understand that the construction of the human being can be naturally reflected in society if we obey those laws that govern the human being. And this is why we need our scholars and our scientists to put to put together a curriculum, a user-friendly curriculum to give our people a base of understanding how to improve ourselves, and with self-improvement comes community improvement and development. Now, in conclusion, what you see here is the manifestation of us as a people understanding how to apply the mechanics of the body into civilization. This is a mixed-use development rendering. And what you see there represents all of those ministries on acres of land. It's a community. You see an organic farm. You see a mosque and school area. You see an amusement park and bazaar. You see, we can name our own roads. Tainetta Muhammad Boulevard. If it's ours, we name our own roads. You have your boulevard. We have an auditing center. And that auditing center, it helps us with our chronic mental pain. Let's go to the next slide. Lastly, I wanted to present the Phoenix Development Proposal. This was an idea of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad during the 1950s. And the concept here in the 1950s, this is a mixed-use development. What he proposed was the Phoenix Islam development. What he wanted to see was business office center. It was restaurant and hotels, a University of Islam and multi-religious center with apartments and entertainment complexes. Today, this would cost up to $100 million. But as the book says, if you bless us, God will bless you. This is what we must do all across the country, from Phoenix to Detroit to Atlanta. We must build our own communities to show that we know God, we understand God, because we are taking the nature in which He created us, and we're building an extensional world that reflects the mechanics of the divine human body. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. We will continue with our subject, the subject or the study of government in general. Let us remember that the Honorable Minister Farrakhan said, if we want to study government, study how God made you. So far, we have covered how to study government, what is the pattern of community building, and the inner workings of the human body. Our final remarks will be related to the need for civic education to provide citizens with the necessary knowledge to perform essential tasks of maintaining a government in general. Students will also gain a deeper insight into the affairs of government, including how to create, monitor, and influence policy which will help foster a healthier attitude toward government structure and garner support for implementation of government values and principles. Of course, our study of government structure is anchored in the point 12 of What the Muslims Believe, in which, quote, we believe further and lastly that Allah is God and besides him there is no God, and he will bring about a universal government of peace wherein we all can live in peace together. This transition of government is therefore rooted in the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the Holy Quran, the Bible, and along with the leadership and guidance of the Honorable Minister Farrakhan from the Almighty God Allah. To promote our body's politic in study of government, this civic educational curriculum should be designed for both adult and youth. Question: what is government? Why is government necessary? What are the most important principles and values of government? What is the relationship of one government to another and to world affairs? What roles do citizens play in government affairs? What is citizenship? What is civic life? How do citizens take part in civic life? What other forms of government are there, and what are their pros and cons? What is a government constitution? Is having a constitution necessary for government? If so, why? The answer to these questions concerning government structure must be studied thoroughly to establish a new civic educational curriculum for a new universal government. Again, let's remember that what the Honorable Minister Farrakhan said, if we want to study government, study how God made you. If we study this magnificent body that will allow us the privilege to build our own communities, he makes all things new. In closing, I reference the tweet by the Honorable Minister Farrakhan on December 27, 2014. When you're doing what you love to do and you are born to do, the soul becomes satisfied. That's how you know that you're on the right course. I pray to Allah that we are on the right course because this is satisfying to our soul. May Allah's divine blessing be with us in this new National Educational Paradigm 2016. Assalamu alaikum.
I accept the educational challenge.
In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Most Merciful, I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and that Muhammad is his messenger. I'd like to greet you all in the greeting words and peace of paradise of Assalamu alaikum. I want to thank the Most Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan for this wonderful opportunity to participate in the online conference for the new educational paradigm. Special thank you to Sister Ava Muhammad and Sister Deborah Muhammad, Brother Troy X. I appreciate this time and this opportunity to be with you. Our topic today is dealing with cultural revolution and the need for libraries and culture, and how the two interplay together. One thing that is of primary importance that we all must remember is that culture is the creative expression of a civilized society. The Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad said very clearly that he desired the very best for his followers. The very best also includes our educational attainment. As we leave an old world and we come completely into a new world, we are experiencing a complete and absolute paradigm shift. As a part of that paradigm shift, we come into a new level of understanding, a new level of ideas. How we collect those ideas and how we express those ideas in our contact with Allah is what we're dealing with. To have a cultural center, to have a library, meaning that our culture centers around and evolves around Allah Himself. We have been blessed with the knowledge that has been hidden for 66 trillion years. That is that Allah God is a man and He appeared to us in the person of Master Muhammad. Libraries contain the collection of information and thoughts of a civilization. Problem number 25 in the Supreme Wisdom lessons given to us by Allah God Master Muhammad introduces us to the library at Cairo, at Al-Azhar. This is very critical because Allah, in giving us the problems, knowing that it is a mathematical expression of our state and our condition now, allows us to understand the importance and the primacy of the collection of our highest form of thoughts. Libraries contain books, they contain maps, they contain artistic expression. So what we are really dealing with is how will we collect the creative expression of our exposure, interaction, and oneness with Allah. A library allows us to catalog this information, to make it searchable, and most importantly, to preserve it for future generations. Our future generations will be able to look back and they will be able to see how we went about the process of identifying our problems, the solutions we attempted, what our successes and our failures were. They are the living memory of all that has ever been in existence. As we move now forward in a new educational paradigm, our new context brings us into the ability to access and to act upon the very thoughts of Allah. In Jeremiah, as well as in the book of John, it begins, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among men. The word is in fact translated from the Greek as well as the Hebrew to mean daba, meaning the thoughts of God. A library then contains the thoughts of God. Well, who is God? Who is Allah? We have been taught by the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad that we are all Allah. So the library contains the living thoughts of Allah and our expression in the creative realm of what we think of Allah and how we think like Allah. A man is coming, and that man has come, and in him is the totality of the paradigm shift, and that is Allah in person. As we begin to access his thoughts through the process of self-improvement, we will develop a new educational system, meaning a manner in which we transfer our ideas, a manner in which we systematically and mathematically cultivate the human being around that which is greater, around the understanding, the belief, and the reality that we were all created as expressions of Allah and that we are Allah. What we do at this time is of critical importance. As we begin to lay the basis for our educational paradigm, our educational shift, we leave from a thought process centered around satanic thought and the lowest moral desires of a society into a high moral standard. Our refinement of those standards is what we will produce creatively. Our creative expression, most importantly, must be in words. Words allow for the transference of thought. The transference of thought allows for the access into the feelings, the emotions, the states, and the conditions of the time in which the person produced it. A deep reading of a thought in the form of books that are pure with the word of Allah, that have not been changed, that have not been corrupted, allows for the mind to engage the mind of production, meaning we travel into the mind of Allah as expressed in that person, and then we can sort through and grow into and evolve with that word. It is known as leptodivinia, sacred reading, so that when we engage the word of Allah through the Holy Quran, through the writings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, we are in fact engaging them in that moment. And it is a sacred process. And in closing, let us not forget that one of the most tragic aspects of our enslavement in this country was the denial of the ability to read. Why? Because reading goes into the very formation of the thoughts of a person. That is why intellectual theft is such a crime, because I take from you your very thoughts. But if we have a way by which we can think and express ourselves creatively and gather those thoughts in a fixed format, it levels the playing field. It levels everything because a library allows for the free interaction of thoughts in an equal manner. The strata of elite is eliminated. It is the common university. It is the universal standard. So we thank Allah for his coming, and we thank Allah for the ability to express ourselves in a culturally refined manner that is pleasing to him. Inshallah, in our very near future, we will build a cultural center which will contain a library per the expressed desires of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, that we as a people will always be able to look over our history, look over our growth and development, and find in it that which we need to springboard into a greater future. I thank you so very much for your time and your kind attention. Thank you once again to the Most Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, Sister Ava, Sister Deborah, Brother Troy, and most importantly, I thank you for your time. I greet you in the greeting words of peace and paradise of Assalamu alaikum.
Will you accept the challenge?
I accept
I accept the educational challenge.
the educational challenge.
How about you? Will you accept the challenge?
I accept.
This is Brother Daniel, and I accept.
I accept the educational challenge.
I accept the educational challenge.
The educational challenge.
The educational challenge.
We don't need to accept this poison doctrine of white supremacy any longer.
I accept the educational challenge!
Will you accept the challenge?